The power of small changes to lead to great transformations. Sigmund Freud made quite a splash in the world of psychology with his studies on the human subconscious. Back in the day, I also did quite a bit of work on Freud. In fact, I even wrote a thesis on the compulsion to repeat. Freud is someone who, on the one hand, had extraordinary discoveries, and on the other, held rather controversial views. And then there's his contemporary, Carl Gustav Jung. Jung brought a very different perspective to the subconscious and human psychology. While Freud approached the subconscious mostly through repressed desires, impulses, and traumas, Jung believed that the subconscious was not only individual, but also had a collective aspect. One of Jung's most important works is his book titled Psychology and Alchemy. This book explains the transformation of the subconscious through the metaphor of alchemy. Throughout history, alchemists have tried to turn metal into gold. However, Jung emphasizes that alchemy is not just an external transformation of matter, but that the real issue is inner transformation. In other words, while alchemists strive to obtain gold, they are actually transforming themselves. Psychology and Alchemy is a work that sheds light on the profound changes that occur within a person's inner world. We often see this concept in literature. Paulo Coelho, in his worldwide best-selling book The Alchemist, actually conveys a similar message. While a person tries to change the outside world, they actually undergo a great transformation within themselves. In other words, the real treasure is not outside, but hidden within the person themselves. If you haven't read it yet, I definitely recommend adding it to your reading list. So, what does this metaphor correspond to in our own lives? How can it be adapted to our daily lives? Let's look at an interesting example to understand this. There is a famous speech by an American general. In the first lesson he gives to his soldiers, the American general says this: "If you want to change your life, the first thing you should do when you wake up in the morning is make your bed." When first heard, this advice may seem simple or insignificant to many people. After all, how could making a bed possibly change a person's life? However, there is a powerful psychological principle behind this suggestion. Our subconscious attitude throughout the day largely depends on how we start the day. The first action we take when we wake up in the morning creates a mental framework that shapes the rest of the day. If we start the day in a disorganized, uncertain, and messy way, it is likely that this mood will persist throughout the day. However, if we give our subconscious the message, "I am an organized person, I finish what I start," this thought will be reflected in everything we do throughout the day. We can explain this process with a law of physics. Let's say there is a ball standing still in the middle of your room. If no force is applied to it, it will remain where it is. But if you give it even a small push, the ball will start to move and will continue on its path with its own momentum up to a certain point. Making your bed in the morning creates a similar effect. This is actually based on a psychological fact. Small successes trigger the next success. The human brain feels a small sense of satisfaction when a task is completed, and this feeling carries over to other tasks as well. If you start your day with the thought, "I started and finished the task," your likelihood of completing the other tasks you need to do that day increases. But what about the opposite? If you start your day with an unmade bed and a disorganized beginning, what message does that send to your subconscious? It sends the message, "I procrastinate, I can't fully finish things." That's why habits that seem small are actually much more powerful than we think. We all know there are many things we've started enthusiastically but left unfinished. We start exercising but quit within a few weeks. We decide to go on a diet, but after a few days we return to our old habits. We intend to learn a new language, but we can't make progress because we don't study regularly. A small but consistent habit like making your bed in the morning can help you break this cycle by disciplining your subconscious. Because the more your subconscious receives the message that you are someone who finishes what they start, the more determinedly it will help you maintain other habits. So if you want to make big changes in your life, try starting with small and consistent steps instead of big and ambitious plans. Because every big change begins with a small action. You also absolutely need to teach this to the people you are coaching. You shouldn't just give advice. You should ensure that these kinds of simple changes are made in their lives and follow up on them. There is a famous saying, "Tiny change, huge results." In other words, small changes lead to big results. This saying reminded me of an example I used years ago. A ship setting out from Tokyo towards South America makes just a 1 centimeter deviation in its course. This deviation, which goes unnoticed in the first 10 minutes, is still invisible to the eye even after an hour. But imagine that after 6 months, instead of reaching its intended destination of South Africa, the ship ends up on a completely different continent. A small deviation creates a big difference. This analogy may not be entirely precise, but I think you understand what I mean, or the message I want to convey, because that small difference grows and grows over time and eventually leads to incredible transformations. The same logic applies to the small changes we make in our daily lives. If the first thing you see when you open the fridge is chocolate, you'll take it, but if you see a cucumber or a carrot there, you'll most likely take that instead. Because in that moment, you have an impulse to act. Most people try to restrain themselves under stress, but the real work should be done before these moments arise. If you design your environment in advance, you'll be more likely to make the right decisions without leaving yourself at the mercy of your subconscious. So, to summarize up to this point, what we do in the external world affects our inner world. That's why even things like making your bed or what you see when you open the fridge can influence your life. And small changes create big results. I especially want to give a striking example about seeing. Professor Alan Penn from the Bartlett School of Architecture is an architect who analyzes the shelf arrangements, store entrances, and customer guidance systems of major companies. He works on this subject. He has an article on this topic. Those who are interested can look it up. In this article, he gives an example about IKEA's store design. We've all visited them. IKEA stores are deliberately designed like a maze. Unlike most supermarkets, you can't freely wander left and right. You have to follow a predetermined route. So why is that? Because thanks to this guidance system, customers unconsciously add products placed along the route to their carts. The article shows that 60% of the products purchased by customers leaving IKEA were not on their shopping lists. That's an incredible rate, 60%. So when you enter the store, you might intend to buy only a few items. But when the layout is designed to appeal to your subconscious, your cart ends up overflowing with things you didn't actually intend to buy. This is where I ask the following question. When stores can manage our subconscious so well, why don't we apply this method in our own lives? We need to take control of our lives. The same thing should happen in our own homes. In other words, the order we establish at home should ensure that when we open the fridge, only the things we actually want to eat are there. Don't think, let me just buy it, I won't eat it anyway. For example, do you want your mind to be calm? Then your living room should also be calm and minimalist. Or do you want a bit of movement, complexity, and vibrancy? Your paintings and colors should reflect that. Psychology and alchemy. Don't forget, what is outside affects our inner world, and our inner world affects the outside world. Be sure to use this at some point in your life, and when you coach others, have them apply it too. For example, I would want to know, what kind of house do you have? Take a photo of your living room. If appropriate, take a photo of the place where you stay or sleep, because these things affect our lives even if we're not aware of it. We now know, even from studies conducted this year, that a cluttered home environment also makes our minds more cluttered. Finally, I will end this lesson with the 100-point rule. I call this energy management. I explain this to you under the title of the 100-point rule and daily decision fatigue. Every morning when we wake up, our brain gives us a certain amount of energy. We can think of this as a 100-point energy budget. Throughout the day, we spend these points on different tasks, different thoughts and actions. But the critical point here is this: how we manage our energy determines how productive and efficient we will be later in the day. Now let's think about it for a moment. You wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is think about what to wear. Spending a long time choosing clothes in front of your wardrobe costs you 10 points of energy. Then you think about what to eat for breakfast. That costs you another 15 points. In just the first hours of the day, you've spent a total of 25 points on small and unnecessary decisions. If you keep going like this, by midday your mind will start to get tired, your attention will wander, and your motivation will begin to drop. That's why people like Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey minimize their clothing choices to avoid wasting energy on such small decisions. In fact, this even got a name. It was called a capsule wardrobe. The main point here was this: I have 100 units of energy in the morning, so I shouldn't use it up on choosing clothes. That's why they always wore jeans and a black t-shirt, focusing all their available energy on their work. This is something I really want you to think about. It seems like a very simple thing, but it's something that greatly affects our lives. For example, we see them doing this. By always wearing the same clothes, they eliminate the burden of making decisions about this, and they devote their energy to bigger, more important matters. In fact, Steve Jobs once said something like this: "I already have to make many difficult decisions throughout the day. I don't want to tire my mind with something as trivial as clothing." Of course, I agree. Now, this is probably crossing your mind. This is much easier for men. It's not that easy for women. But at the very least, this might give you some different ideas. I would also like to wish the ladies good luck in advance. Their job is much harder. So what I'm trying to say is that in daily life, we all face countless small decisions without even realizing it. Many things such as what we will wear in the morning, what we will eat, which route we will take to work, or when we will check our emails, consciously or unconsciously drain our energy. Even though these may seem small, each one represents a processing load for the brain. In psychology, this is called decision fatigue. When we have to make too many decisions throughout the day, our minds get tired and we can no longer make our critical decisions in a healthy way. That's why the more planned and organized we spend our day, the more efficiently we can preserve our energy. Let's recall these simple strategies for this purpose. Eliminate unnecessary decisions. Decide in advance what you will wear and what you will have for breakfast in the morning. Set your priorities. Reserve the most productive hours of your day for your most important tasks. Stick to your routine. Knowing what you will do when you wake up in the morning relaxes your mind and prevents you from wasting energy on unnecessary thoughts. This shows that routines are actually very important. For example, some people start their day by having coffee when they wake up in the morning. In fact, this routine is surprisingly beneficial for the brain. What is more beneficial than drinking coffee here is that the brain knows how it will start the next day. This is a very important point. And embrace minimalism as much as possible. Fewer choices mean fewer decisions. The fewer unnecessary choices you make in your life, the more efficiently you work. At the end of the day, how we manage our energy determines our success and productivity. The more organized and scheduled we are, the more efficiently we can preserve our energy. Now we have come to the end of our lesson. See you in another lesson. Goodbye, my fellow traveler.